Hello, I'm Julie Swenson, Managing Director of Forward Theater Company in Madison, Wisconsin.
And I'm Mike Fisher, Milwaukee-based theater writer and dramaturg.
I'm Jen Uphoff-Gray, founder and artistic director of Forward Theater Company, and this is Theater Forward, a twice-monthly conversation about theater from a local, regional, and national perspective. From Madison to Manhattan, we're excited to share insight into our own company while exploring issues surrounding theater in the Midwest and around the country. Welcome to episode 93 of Theater Forward.
93, all right.
It's a good number. For this episode, we are going to talk about understudies, the unsung heroes of the theater world, and now more than ever before. And for this conversation, we are joined by two amazing actors who have personal experience in this area, Rána Roman and Kailey Azure Green. Rána is an actor and singer based in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. She's also a member of Forward's advisory company. Kailey is a performer and movement director currently working in Southern Wisconsin at Children's Theater of Madison and American Players Theater. Welcome, Rána and Kailey.
Thank you. Yeah.
It's so good to have you both here. And can we just start? I'd love to have you each just tell us a little bit of who you are as a theater artist, and then we will get into your understudy war stories. Rána, why don't we start with you?
I started out primarily doing musical theater. That's my first love. And, have been fortunate enough to be able to branch out into non-musical theater as well. But pre-pandemic, I was one of the fortunate few folks that were making a full-time living just performing. So, that's me in a nutshell. We're trying to put those things all back together now that everybody's up and running, but one day at a time, one show at a time.
Exactly. And Kailey, how about you?
I'm originally from Utah. And I also started in musical theater. I got some of my musical theater training from Utah Valley University. And then end of 2020, I moved out to Washington, D.C. to continue my professional career, which is then how I got connected with a director who got me to American Players Theater. On top of being an actor, as you said, I movement direct, but I love anything movement on stage. So movement direction, choreography, fight direction, and then a newer aspect of theater, intimacy direction as well. So also me in a nutshell.
Yeah. Well, so Kailey, let's talk about some of your understudy experiences first. And honestly, that's how all of us at Forward Theater got to know you, because, we are regular attendees and fans of the work happening every summer out at American Players Theater. And you were in every show I saw. And sometimes I know that was planned, and sometimes it wasn't. And I have really jokingly, but quite sincerely, been calling you the MVP of their season because I know you really jumped in on so many levels. And I would love to just hear a little bit about that, what that summer was like, and also whether you've had a lot of other understudy experience, if this was, really your trial by fire.
Yeah. This past summer was incredible. So I originally was hired this past season as a assistant director for The Rivals with Aaron Posner. And then I was an understudy, and I was given 8 understudy tracks total. I had 4 in Love Labor's Lost and 4 in Sense and Sensibility. And, of course I came out there really excited and hopeful for this season, and also hoping that I would never be utilized, because that is part of being an understudy. Oh gosh, which story do you want me to start with? So the first time I ended up on stage was for The Rivals, the show I had assistant directed. We had an actor who needed to take care of some things in their lives. And so about, I think a week before it opened, maybe 2 weeks, Brenda DeVita texted me and was like, "Hey, can we talk?" And I was like, "Sure." And that's when they were like, "Hey, will you step into this really small role so this actor can take care of other things, take care of their other shows? And for a limited time, we just need someone to take care of it for 2 weeks." And I was like, absolutely. Like, I love this play. I love these people. I'd love to be on that stage. And then I never left that show. The next one is the most wild. So I'll take a bit more time with this. for those of you who have not been to APT, there are two spaces. There's the Up the Hill Theater, and then there's the Touchstone, which is an indoor space. Up the Hill was Sense and Sensibility playing that night, one of the shows I understudy. And I had gotten tickets to see The River Bride, which was inside at the Touchstone. And as a good audience member, I turned off my phone. As a bad understudy, I turned off my phone. Yeah, about 20 minutes into the show, I'm sitting second row center, and house staff comes and waves me down, and I turn to look at them. Our whole row turned to look at them, and she points at me, and I pointed at myself to like, me? She nodded, and I immediately thought, I'm going on for Sense and Sensibility. Something has happened. I am needed. I picked up my stuff and followed them out, and they confirmed, like, hey, you're needed up the hill. We have an actor down. And I was like, okay, who am I going on for? We don't know. Okay, we start heading up the hill. I do get picked up by one of the amazing assistant stage managers, Alexandra.
You're physically running up the hill?
Yeah. Well, I knew they were coming, so I didn't want to miss them. So I was just kind of walking. But there's only one way to come up and down the hill on a golf cart. So I got picked up. And that is when I learned, that everyone was running around with their heads off, like, chickens, just frantic, because they had an actor hurt on top of trying to find me. So like, if I could be calm, cool, and collected. And that's when I learned that I was going on for Margaret Dashwood, which is the youngest Dashwood sister. I get up the hill, Brenda DeVita comes running out. She's like, are you ready? Can you do this? And I think I maybe forgot what was happening. And I was like, yes, who am I going on for? Do I have a wig? I need a script. Can I go to the bathroom? And was also very upfront about the fact that like I would go on and I would do it, and I would help support the show so all of my other wonderful friends could finish a show that they spent so much time on. And I had never had a put in. And I did not have my understudy script. So all of my notations, my blocking was at home where I worked on it. So they got me a blank script. And while getting dressed, I was highlighting my lines. And for the most part, people are like, she's a 14-year-old girl. Stay by mom. You'll be fine. And I was like, great. And the first act was wild because she never really leaves the stage, and she's a character that loves these bugs. So I also would get off stage, and an ASM would shove another prop in my hand and then shove me back on stage. But thankfully we got through the first act, and then the second act was much easier for her. And it was wild and wonderful, and an incredible evening for not only just me, but like everyone that got to kind of show up and support, and audience members that I've run into have been like, I was there that night. So many exciting points of view. I love hearing about everyone else and where they were that night.
And
so that was number 2.
Right? Love Labor's Lost?
Sorry. Yeah. So then July, we're opening second rep. And I wake up to a spring green caller ID. And I was like, okay, I can do this. And Evelyn is on the other side of the phone, and she was like, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from right now, but Matthew Benison Cruz, who plays Moth in Love's Labor's Lost, has symptoms of COVID. We want to start prepping you for the role. There was a preview, I think, either that night or the night after. I don't remember exactly. So I was like, okay, I just woke up. I'm going to shower and eat, and I will be there. But they hadn't opened yet. So I was also walking into still a rehearsal process. So I think the first thing that I did when I got there was I learned the songs, because there's Moth played a song on the ukulele and then sang at the end of the show. And then Moth and Armado had a small sword fight. So then I also spent some time with Trini Sandoval, sort of learning and or re-choreographing this fight that happens in Act 1. And then because of COVID and COVID restrictions for equity, I did that show for about 2 weeks. Yeah.
Wow.
So those were the 3. I accidentally had a full season at APT.
Amazing.
I don't know that you're can I really quickly say that I got my equity card as an ASM understudy for a play in New York called The Widow Clare. And I was understudying Hallie Foote, whose father wrote the play. Horton Foote wrote the play. she was always concerned that, I mean, somehow if I go on, her father would start writing roles for me. No. But I do want to say, because I'm not hearing it from you, Kailey. So I was the ASM, so I really did know the play. But the first time I went on, I remember walking off stage and I said to 4 of my cast members, I have no idea where I am right now. And they're like, yeah, right. Here's a script. Here's what you do. Here's the next scene. And what I'm not hearing is the panic involved in this. You seem to be very like, yes, I'll jump up, but I think your head goes to some other place. There is right. Yes, some alternate reality, and I can't imagine running or being carted up the hill, wondering what role you're going to play in a half an hour.
Yeah, I will say that absolutely there was panic, but I knew the only way to move forward was to show up. And I will say my ability to retell the story has also come because I've been able to sit back and think about that night. I've heard other points of views. But if you would ask me the morning after what happened,
no idea.
I think I did a show. I said words on the stage, right? Like that. Yeah.
Right.
Yes. Panic.
Right.
Indeed.
Exactly.
Well, we're going to come back to some. We're going to come back to some of that. But Rána, I would love to hear some of your understudy story in terms of your experience, because I know that over the past year you have both been an understudy and also been able to rely on an understudy who covered for you. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, up until last season, my experience with understudies was, being on the receiving end of someone being able to go on for me, and that happened maybe 3 times between 2006 and 2022. 3 times. One, I had full bronchitis and couldn't speak, and I was in a show that I was speaking and singing, and so the director of the show was a young Latin female, and she went on with a script. So the panic was on her end, but obviously she knew the show just as well as any of us. The second time, same person. My grandmother had passed away in Puerto Rico, and the company said, no, you go. We'll take care of it. You go. She was not the director or assistant director or anything, but she was the company manager. And so she, again, went on in my stead with a script. And I think that's it. Did I say 3 times?
Yeah.
I think that's it. I then fast forward to 2022, and I was asked if I could be an understudy for Titanic at the Milwaukee Rep, be a part of the ensemble, and then also understudy. I was asked to understudy 2 tracks, and I said, give me the weekend to read the script and listen to the soundtrack. And I really needed to decide if I thought I was capable of learning an ensemble track plus 2 principal tracks. I wasn't sure that I could, because and I've been quoted saying this before, I think understudies are magical unicorns that have a certain way of thinking and organizing that not all of us have. So I, honest to God, was like, I'm not one of those people, because I'd seen other people do it over and over again, last minute, like you just described. And I was like, that's not me. That sounds like nightmares that I've had. So the tracks were small enough, the lead tracks were small enough that I had enough lead time that I thought, yeah, okay, I can do this. But then when I actually got my contract, there were 3 roles that I was understudying. So it was age range from like 28 to 60. I was being asked to be able to portray. But because of the way things are set up at the Rep with their internship program, their EPR program, rehearsals and even a full run through are built in to the process. So no one, not that there isn't any level of, nerves or anything like that, but you are very much prepared to go on. And because I was understudying all three of those tracks, our understudy run, I actually played all three in the understudy run. And I wish it had been filmed because that was just, it was so much fun. And I'm sure it was funny to watch it, especially in some key moments where we literally have husbands just passing, one after the next, just switching from man to man to keep the storyline going, like three different people. So yeah, I was very, very prepared. So when I went on for the first time during our first run of Titanic, it was a day of thing. I knew by the end of the first show that there was a good possibility that one of my overstudies was going to be out. And so I had time to let that sit, and then got confirmation that for sure I was going to be going in. So for me, instead of it being panic, it was so much fun. The only part that you don't get to do is actually rehearse it on stage in costume with costume changes. That's all missing. But blocking wise and music wise, that is all taken care of ahead of time. That's a luxury of that particular theater and that program. So then my final, so I actually was supposed to go on when we got shut down because the entire cast got COVID. We were supposed to be going, and I was going to have to go in for Carrie Hitchcock that day for the first time. And I would have been ready. It would have been okay. But too many of us were ill to let the show go on. So when they remounted the second time, we had 2 offstage swings that first time. So when I went in for a principal, there was an offstage swing who went in for me. And the second time around, they actually hired 9 offstage swings. Yes.
You mean they weren't just Kailey?
No. 9 offstage swings. So that reduced my cover track. So I was only covering 2 instead of 3, because then they had a dedicated offstage swing for the third. Mm-hmm. But of the 9, all but 2 went on during the run. We spent the first week, maybe 10 days with 2 or 3 understudies on. Mm-hmm. So those swings who came in and watched, they didn't come in until the week before tech. So they came in and they watched, and then they were in for opening weekend. And then a week after we opened, then we actually do our understudy run. So they got to run the other tracks that they, had. But yeah, that's what it took for a cast of, I think 16, maybe. Mm-hmm. If it was just the show proper, it would have been 16. In order to adequately cover it, it took 9 extra cast members.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And tell us about your Evita experience.
Oh, blessed angel. So when I found out that we had 2 show days for Evita, I was like, are you bananas? I don't know that I could do that twice in a day. But this year, for the first time, Skylight Music Theater has an internship program. They have 4 performers that, do their education program and had been understudies in shows prior to Evita. But for Evita, because it typically is a very large ensemble piece, they were starting on stage for the first time, that they were going to be on all the time. And so I did have a dedicated understudy, but who was a part of an incredibly valuable ensemble. Normally there's like 24 to 30 people in an Evita ensemble, and we had 8. So they were running around singing and dancing their hearts out, trying to, be the entire population of Buenos Aires. But this young woman was a very, fine singer and a really strong personality. Like, I was nervous when we went in on the first day, because they all look so very, very young. And I was like, this is a lot to ask of someone if they've just come out of college. But through the rehearsal process, I got to watch her a little bit more, and she was not 22, and she did have more experience, and she had a lot of autonomy to her voice, like sticking up for herself and others. And I was like, okay, she's capable of doing this. So yeah, in our very last week, I was battling a cold on top of vocal fatigue. And I was on all the steroids a person could be on, but it just could not keep up with the post-nasal drip that kept agitating my throat. So we mercifully got canceled on a Friday when we got that big snowstorm. And that gave me a full, 36 hours or so to, rest vocally. So I was able to come in and I think, was it the Thursday?
Mm-hmm. It was Thursday.
Yeah. So then I was able to come in and do the Friday show. But by the end of the Friday show, I was actually losing my voice, which was something that had not happened throughout the rest of the cycle of my cold. My voice was just different, but it wasn't going away. So I was like, now I'm actually losing it. And so we decided that she would go on for the matinee, and in hopes that I might be able to do the evening show. But I went and watched her matinee, and was just so incredibly proud that she had all the material. She had all the words. She had all the blocking. She had all the notes. She was a completely different human being under completely different circumstances. But I'll be damned if she did not keep that show going and not have the company, who is a smaller company, not have them lose all those tickets. Because all the tickets that had been had to be canceled for Thursday night were put into the matinee on Saturday. I was not better enough for Saturday night. So, I went and hugged her and cried and said, would you like another crack at it? Where you can be more present in your body. And she said, yes. So it was such a gift. And what that allowed me to do then was to be able to actually close the show on Sunday. And to not close a show that had begun literally 3 years earlier, would have been heartbreaking for me. We were in rehearsals for the concert version of this show when COVID shut everything down. So it was something that I needed to finish. And literally the very next day I did the show, and people didn't know that I was sick. I knew I was sick. I knew I was making changes. And there was like one area where something came out that was like, whoop, everybody heard that. But the very next day, I literally had no voice and I couldn't walk. I had a inflamed, old injury in my foot, and I couldn't even walk. And the day before, I was in ballroom shoes, dancing and dying. I felt fine in the show. I cannot explain it. I cannot explain the foot, but yeah.
Can I ask? Oh, sorry, Jen. To both of you, there was a time, when if the person that people have bought tickets for was not in the show for whatever reason. People moved their tickets.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if that's going to become less and less, like audience members will just anticipate now that the cast that they came to see might not be entirely there. And you know what you guys think about that?
I think that, as people understand all of the regulations that go along with COVID safety protocols, I think that is going to be more normalized. And I guess I don't know how it works for other theaters, but in our case, there wasn't like a notification that goes out that gives people time to change their tickets. So there's just an announcement at the top of the show, the role of Ava Perón, normally played by Rána Roman, will be played by Sarah Sapien. So everyone found out there.
Yeah.
In a moment.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that question up, Julie, because I think it's so. Thank you both for sharing like some of your personal successes and travails in this area. But I think one of the main reasons we want to talk about it on this podcast is because, the idea of understudies has always been a big part of the theater business, but it has changed dramatically in the last few years at every level. At the Broadway level where, there would always be understudies and occasionally someone would go on or you'd have a planned cover, so someone's not singing a difficult role 8 shows a week. Mm-hmm. But, you'd show up and maybe there'd be someone in the ensemble who's out or, you'd have one little slip in your program. So at the Broadway level now you could go and half the company might be covers mm-hmm. and understudies and swings. Mm-hmm. But all the way down. Smaller regional companies like ours, bigger regional companies like the Rep and APT, even school companies now, people are routinely hiring understudies because the alternative is having to cancel a lot of performances because mm-hmm. COVID, obviously, the biggest part of that, but it's also not just COVID because mm-hmm. part of the reassessment of our field that has been happening, motivated both by the pandemic, but also by a lot of the social justice reckoning and the racial justice reckoning, has caused our field to really examine our work conditions. Mm-hmm. And a big part of the ethos of folks working in the theater was always the show must go on. And I can't tell you the number of actors I've worked with who I later found out were going on feeling ill or with a minor injury. Obviously, if we knew someone was really sick or had a major injury, we were taking them out of the show, but we mm-hmm. didn't hire understudies for everything for our little 3-week run. We were like, the odds are we're going to get through okay, and I'd rather give the money that we have to pay everybody a little bit better. Mm-hmm. That's not the world anymore, right? You kind of have to.
I would add on, Jen, too, it's not just the sick, it's even what Rána, you were saying about, and they were nice enough to let me go. My grandmother passed away. Mm-hmm. I hope that post-pandemic, that's just a given. Yep. We have understudies now, and if somebody close to you is sick or has passed away, artists should be able to go. And that has...
Or even weddings.
Or weddings, exactly.
Yes.
And that has not been the case. You've either had to take the gig or go to the wedding, but they could never meet. And I hope in this advent of really talented understudies, people can go to weddings and funerals or take off time when they're not feeling well.
Yeah, I should say, so my grandmother passed in like 2011, I think. And I was equity already by then. So like, it was more than just the company saying, being nice. It was in my contract too. Like when those things happen, equity has 3 or 4 days you are allowed to take for bereavement when close family members. So it was my right. And I was the one thinking, maybe I shouldn't. I have no understudy. And the company was like, don't you dare. You will go. You will go be with your family. We will handle it. Like, it was a first stage children's theater. And the woman who went on for me, Desi Rosas, had actually just lost a grandparent a few months before then and left sooner than she would have liked to. That it was her decision to come back earlier. And she told me, I will not let you make the same mistake that I made. Mm. So both the combination of what our union puts in place for us and also, you know, the company making sure that those of us who were used to just going on under any circumstance, they stopped me from making a bad decision.
I love the fact that in addition to all the ways this is obviously a humane and necessary development in terms of the evolution of this profession into one that is more workable and fair for the people who are in it. It's re-educating in really good ways audiences. I mean, that's obviously the perspective. You know, these stories have just reconfirmed for me all the reasons why, you know, even though I wanted to be an actor once upon a time and had zero talent, even if I had talent, I never could have done what the two of you have described to it. I mean, it's just like, it just blows my mind. And it just is why I adore actors so much. But audiences need to be educated, especially in terms of what we've seen on Broadway in the last 15 to 20 years with this sort of buildup of an ever greater star system with more and more imports from California in shows. The idea that in this genuinely and generally collaborative enterprise, that there are a lot of people who can do this really well in a company that is investing properly in its resources. And Kailey, you know, Jen said it. I mean, you blew all of us away. Those of us that got to see you at APT last summer, I didn't even know who you were going into that. And I haven't missed an APT show in forever. So for that to be part of that season and for that to be your first season there was just a gift to audiences. It was an exciting, you know, sort of add-on for people who didn't know that they were going to get that. And instead of thinking of it as, oh, bummer, there's an understudy in this show, it's like, wow, I have enough trust and faith in this company and the way it trains its people to know I am going to learn about another wonderful, exciting artist and the way that APT has been introducing me to wonderful, exciting artists forever. And that is a great thing for audience members to think about so that we start really seeing the work as this collaboration of all these great people and also being surprised by people that we might have otherwise never been able to see. And I don't mean to romanticize the hardships that you all have gone through, but it's a huge gift for those of us, and not just because the shows are able to go on.
Well, and there's such an energy that I feel when I'm in an audience for a show that's not one I worked on, when I'm just a patron sitting in a show. And when you know that somebody is an understudy, you just feel everybody in the audience leaning in support of that human.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And their efforts. It becomes this collective sort of like cheering on your sports team, right? Like, oh, here comes the underdog and we are going to root for them. I mean, that's the vibe that I always feel when I'm in the house for a show where the understudy has gone on. And it's such a wonderful reinforcement for an audience of the incredible liveness of theater. Mm-hmm. And the fact that every show you see is different, slightly sometimes, but different from the one someone saw the day before or the day after, and how special that is.
Yes. There is absolutely no way I would have gotten through Sense and Sensibility without every single person, without Laura Rook and Samantha Newcomb and Nancy Rodriguez, who are the Dashwood family, as well as Marcus Straczynski and Ty Fanning, who are the two men who interact the most with that family. Kind of being either pushed in the right direction or remind, like even before we go on, or whispered in my ear, like where we need to be or what I need to take off stage. But I was nodding in enthusiasm because I have been able to experience that as an understudy and as an understudy being on stage with a newer understudy. Because when I went on in Love's Labor's Lost, it was for COVID, and we had several COVID cases go through the company those few weeks. So they prepped me for Moth. I did a show. I think we even did another day of rehearsals. And then I think it was opening day, we learned that Sarah Day had tested positive and was not going to be able to do the show. And so we had to then spend the day of our final rehearsal prepping Nancy to go on for Boyette. But then I was also Nancy's understudy for Marcaday. So then we were trying to find who's going to do Markaday since Kylie's doing Moth. So that energy of everyone just being like, let's do it. Okay. Who can do what? Yes, we sometimes need to drop the ball and cancel the show because we do need to take care of our community and give people a break and give time to prepare. And also the joy and wildness of like, how are we going to do it? We'll figure it out. And then we also we did experience that as well with Sensibility because Sarah was out. Tracy Arnold was Sarah's understudy, and Tracy so wonderfully was like, they don't need to bring in my understudy. I can just do both tracks. And so Tracy Arnold absorbed Sarah Day's track, and they simplified her costume so she could do really quick like head cover and like shawl costume changes. But Tracy Arnold did her initial role and Sarah Day's track. And I remember the first show where they said, you know, the role of Sarah Day is going to be played by, there was this initial like, oh, because the audience is there, loves Sarah Day. She's been there for, I don't even know how many years. And then they heard it was Tracy Arnold. And then there was a little more excitement. And then hearing and watching the audience realize that Tracy was doing both of these roles was so fun. It was so fun. And then just so exciting to be on stage with Tracy and take care of Tracy and take care of our understudies as we just strive to continue to create the art that we love. It's such great energy.
I'm so glad you talk about that because that is... It's such an energizing thing. You guys do long runs at APT, and we do long runs at the Rep. And so there is nothing more exciting than when a swing is going in for the first time. You rally around them. Everybody, like, you know, the rest of us, we know our show backwards and forwards. So we actually have time to help them with like little things like depending on how they prep, you know, understudies have like note cards so that they, you know, it's all shorthand, reviewing before they go on. But the stuff that they don't necessarily know might be like the pace at which you need to take this traffic pattern, what order to put your costume pieces on, because, you know, the person who's standing next to you knows that it might get snagged in your skirt. So you're going to want to put your skirt on first and your shoes on last, you know, so like giving all of those little tidbits to help a person walk on stage and look like nothing happened. You know, that energy backstage is so gorgeous. Yeah, it is.
And then it carries
just as much of a show backstage as it is on stage. Yeah.
And that energy from everyone supporting carries onto the stage and continuing that. And there is an element of like, I don't know, I'm out of body. And at the same time, everyone is so present.
Yeah.
And so aware of what's going on. And the audience feels that. So like, I just got to go see the Broadway tour of To Kill a Mockingbird. And I sat down and opened my thing and Scout's Understudy was on. And I was like, I'm so excited to see an understudy. And I don't know if it was just me creating all the energy, but it always is so exciting. And I don't think it's a new thing. I think people were open to understudies pre-pandemic. It's just we've had to have way more of them.
The whole nother level.
Since 2020. Yeah.
One of my favorite moments of all time, sorry, this will be the last thing I'll say about it, of my favorite moments when I was on for Alice, who was normally played by Lillian Castillo. This beautiful moment. I'm in an evening gown. The lights are ridiculous. And I was supposed to step upstage center, but didn't remember to step upstage center. I'm not even doing anything. I'm not singing. Somebody else is someone else's moment. And Matt Daniels just gently takes his hand, places it on you know, the middle of my back, and just a little. And I was like, "That's right." Like, I would have just stood there out of my light had Matt not in full, you know, in character, just was so kind.
You know, it's I'm going to start to kind of wind our conversation down, only because I know we could easily do this for many hours, and we've been talking for a bit now. But you know, it's been I have frequently myself and heard colleagues over these last couple of years talk about just this broad topic of understudies, and it since COVID began with a sense of, you know, sort of slumping of the shoulders. You know, for companies that didn't routinely hire them, it's more expensive. Even for companies that did routinely hire them, they're now, 9 swings for Titanic, right? So it's a huge expense. It's a big complication. It's a safety net that's being utilized more often. So that comes with a lot of mental stress and headaches as you're sorting everything out. So there's no question that the way in which the part of our ecosystem that understudies fulfill has evolved in ways that can be tiring or stressful or expensive or all of those things. But what this conversation is really reminding me is that it's a boon for audiences in a lot of ways, not just because maybe a show doesn't have to be canceled otherwise, but that energy we're all talking about, that sense of peeking behind the curtain, that reminder of the liveness, all of that good energy that comes out of an understudy situation for an audience, but also all the ways in which, our field is getting healthier. And the fact that it's not it's just a more normal thing to say, I need to miss a show and have my understudy go on, whether it's for more remunerative employment or a family emergency or an illness, whatever it is, that's going to make all of us healthier as a field. And that's a really good thing. Mm-hmm. And so keeping those things in balance and remembering all the goodness that we are getting out of this deeper engagement with our understudies now compared to a few years ago. It's a good reminder. My goodness, I'm so grateful to both of you for sharing these stories.
Yes.
I went on a journey.
This seems like a conversation to be continued, like over beers.
Oh, yeah.
The horror stories. We want to hear,
Yes.
That's for another time.
So good. I will say that is all for this particular episode of Theater Forward, a conversation about theater in Wisconsin, the Midwest, and America. I'm Jen Ophoff-Gray.
And I'm Julie Swenson.
And I'm Mike Fisher. Our podcast is produced, as always, by the great Scott Hayden. No understudy there, because if something happened to him, we would be in real trouble. And you can follow us or share your thoughts on Facebook or Twitter. That's at Theater Forward. As always, theater spelled with an E-R.
And if you enjoy this podcast, don't forget to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you might tune in. And please be sure to leave a comment. We'd love to hear from you.
We're so grateful to have you listening, and we will be back soon for another Theater Forward conversation.